Okay, so we're dealing now with one of the most, I don't know if the word is fundamental, core, central, deep, I don't know what the right word is, but it's a very major idea in Chassidus. What is that? It's the teaching, the insight of the Arizal, Rabbi Gloria, who writes that the process of creation began with Tzimtzum Harisha, in the first Tzimtzum, the first contraction or removal of God's presence. God forbid, whatever that means. And we're discussing until now an argument, a very serious argument amongst the deep philosophers and all great righteous people, but and very wise people, but a deep argument of what does it mean when Arizal said that God wanted to create the world, but there was no room to do it because everything was God. So God moved himself to the side, made a place clear of himself, the circle. He ingested in that area a tiny bit of self called the Kav, and started creation with that. What does that mean? And in general, we should know that there's really four different things to argue about, or there's two really arguments of four ways to see things. One discussion is, where did this contraction or this abstract concealment take place? Did it take place within the essence of God called the Mar, the source of God, or did it take place within God's light, God's expression? That's one argument. Another discussion is, was it an actual concealment? Was God actually, I don't want to say successful, and did he actually conceal himself, meaning remove himself from this place, and this place became a no-fly zone and a clear place of God? Or it was just an appearance to us. It was really nothing changed. Just to us, it appears like it changed. Like if, we lost our hearing, God forbid, wouldn't change the fact that the music is playing, we just wouldn't hear it. It doesn't mean that the music is playing. The activities are going on. We don't see it, we don't sense it because our own lack of sensitivity. Like, right now in this room, there are millions of conversations going on, millions of music songs being played. You only have to have the right device to tap into it, whether it's an internet device, whether it's a radio receiver, to realize in this era now, there's all sorts of stuff going on. So, meaning, is it that it's not seen and we don't see it because it's not seen, or it's not being expressed, or it's being expressed 100%, and it's just that we can't sense it? This argument of what actually took place by this first Tzimtzum, this first age, is a core argument. The Alter Rebbe takes a position that you must say that Tzimtzum was not actually a Tzimtzum, it just appears to be so. We call it Tzimtzum is not Kipshutai. This is just a recap where we're up to. Others, like the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, and the people that he quote, say no, there was an actual concealment, and they say the reason to say that is out of respect to God. You think God's going to get himself involved in all the nicky-picky things of the world? There's a halacha that says you can't wear your tefillin or say Shema when there's, a diaper or something around. You think God's in a place where you can't say Shema? You think God's there in this world, the lowest of all worlds, God's here? No, God's managing it from upstairs. He has a management system. He doesn't need to be here, actually. His presence is felt here by his direction, by his governing powers, by his control. And this also gets into the argument of how much of what goes on in the world is divine providence. Is it just a general plan and God's monitoring that people go here, this guy should fall down the stairs, etc.? Or is it that God cares when a little ant crosses the road, how it wiggles its feet as it crosses, etc.? Meaning, is every single thing godliness, or is God management? And this is a major dispute amongst how to understand God's connection to the world based on what took place by the Tzimtzum. This argument only lasted about 100 years, because eventually people started seeing this perspective as well as the Alter, and most things that people were opponents to the Alter Rebbe about, almost everything became the standard for all Jewish people. In general, it was just like a new idea, people couldn't accept it. But as time went by, whether it's how to do shechita, how to say certain prayers and davening, that the Alter Rebbe felt that people are saying it in the sort of old school, instead of realizing what we have a chance to tap into. We have much more awareness of God today. There was a time, there's a fascinating talk of the Rebbe quoting the Zohar. The Zohar says, where it says in the Chumash, that in the 600th year of Noach's life, which is the year 1656, he was born in 1056. So in 1656, it says in the 600th year, the windows of the heavens opened up, the depths of the earth opened up, and the waters came flying. from above and from below. Massive water came from everywhere. The Zohar says this is a prophecy of what's going to be in the 600th year of the 6th millennium. That means in the year, what will be equivalent to the 1839, 1840, there'll be a massive burst. It's really starting from 1740 to 1840, those 100 years. A massive burst of from above spiritual wisdom that we're going to have an understanding of Hashem that we never had before. Chassidus is going to be taught and Kabbalah is going to be shared and all this information will come out. And also technology will have a burst. The waters from below represents technology. There'll be sudden burst of technology and information and science, and the world will have a burst of information from above and below, and that will usher in, says the Zohar, the era of Mashiach, getting the world ready for it. And there's a whole insight of the Rebbe, why we have to know that, why is it important, but the secular knowledge isn't the main thing, it's the spiritual knowledge, and he says you can't separate them. The reason why there's developments in technology is all for the ability to study Torah, etc. But the bottom line is, in these generations, in the times of the Alter Rebbe, he was living in those times, there was a burst of information. So Alter Rebbe says today we can have a greater knowledge of God. And our knowledge of God should take us to understand a much better picture of how things should be done, and what things went on, and what is God, etc. Other people say, "Oh, we're afraid of new stuff. New stuff sounds scary." Some people, the Amish, have tradition not to use certain technology. I don't know what their logic is, but some people are afraid of change. I'm happy. I still use paper notes. I don't use that phone for this. I still write checks. We do. We're a little old-fashioned. We're slowly getting into now. Get used to it. Some people, the young generation, don't even know what a piece of paper is anymore. Don't even know what it means to like a credit cards or checks. So they don't even know people used to take the checks to the bank, the cash. Now you just take a picture of it and it's done. People say, just send me a picture of that check. How is that going to help you? That's all I need. But that's a different world. So, but the bottom line is that the Alter Rebbe felt that going in the direction of saying that Tzimtzum actually was a Tzimtzum has two major flaws in understanding God, and God forbid, very dangerous. And today we're going to go into that next piece of understanding why. Last week, and the week before, we explained what he says differently. What he says differently is that the Tzimtzum did not happen in actuality. It just appears to us that way. It seems to us, from our perspective, it sounds like the Tzimtzum happened. Did it really happen? No. And it's just an appearance to us. Now he's going to explain why you have to say that. Why do you have to say it didn't really happen? Why can't you say it happened? What's wrong? So we're here inside on page 166, and we're approximately exactly the second line. Exactly the second line, 2 words to the end of the line. V'hinei milvad. When we have a Tanya, okay. V'hinei milvad she'i efsher klal leimer. First of all, the first basic reason why you can't say that Tzimtzum actually happened is a very basic idea. When you say something is not here anymore, for an example, something is not seen. Why would I say, for an example, we spoke about the idea of 2 times 2 = 4, or actually we're saying 2 + 2 = 4. That's one of those times, and 2's where the pluses and multiplication work together. 2 + 2 = 4 is not an idea that can be taken in and out of this room. It doesn't take up a space. Nevertheless, there are spaces where it's revealed. I can say in my mind 2 + 2 = 4, but not in my leg. I mean, my leg doesn't sense it. Yes, my brain could sense it. But by saying that, what it means is something about my leg and something about 2 + 2 = 4 that it doesn't fit there. Yes, the truth is everywhere. It's today, it's tomorrow, it's yesterday, it's in all cities. It's the same here, it's the same as in Chicago. But the bottom line is, the place where I can express it is only in my mind or on paper, on a blackboard, but not like I can't explain it to a chair. I can't have my elbow think about it. But by saying that means that there's some limitation. To say that God, now the people who said that Tzimtzum is kipshutai, they didn't, God forbid, mean they were brilliant scholars, holy people. We're not knocking their greatness, God forbid. These are great, great scholars and believers in God and amazing people. But they're mistaken in the sense that they try and apply certain features of humanity and of physicality to God. But they didn't, God forbid, say that God was here and he moved to the side. No, they were talking also in spiritual concepts. It's a spiritual idea. God, so to speak, made space or something. It's like I said, I cleared my mind. Well, you took a broom or you took a white, you wiped it. No, my mind right now, it's even different than a computer. Computer actually has magnetic or some things that, if you know how the stuff works, you can actually clear away. In my mind, I am clearing my mind out to hear something new. I'm until now worrying about or excited about something coming up, going to Disney World, and now I'm thinking about, this question you have for me. It doesn't mean actually, it's a spiritual concept that I cleared my mind. Even such a spiritual concept you can't use by God, because you're saying that God is limited to certain situations, certain times when it's available, not available, he fits here and not there. You can't use any concept of availability or fitting or compatibility to Hashem and any issue in the world. So number or any place or any idea or any spiritual concept. So therefore he says, Milvad she'yefsher klal leimer inyanat tzimtzum k'mishutay. Aside the fact that you can't simply say that God made an actual tzimtzum, meaning he cleared a space for real, and according to that, God's presence in this world is not the same as his presence as it was before the world, meaning God changed. In the beginning, God was everywhere, and now God is not everywhere. That's Tanya's here. Then that is something which goes against Torah, because Hashem says a concept, Ani Havaya, I am God, I have never changed. I'm the same before and after. If you say God's presence is found somewhere less than before, I cleared my mind, I made space for some other idea, that means there's a change. You might say it's not a physical change, good, but it's a change, and that can't be said. Because you can't apply a physical, bodily concept to God. We could say, I cleared my mind, I refreshed my energy. I could say things that sort of, I don't have the strength for it. I did have the strength, I made time for it. Making time doesn't mean like I just, I made 2 loaves of bread at one time. Time means it's a concept. I made time, I made it a priority. These expressions are only applied to human beings. God doesn't have these concepts. And he says, "Hanivdol mehem ribuy devavois havdalis adin kates." You can't in any way apply it to God, who was millions and billions of times removed from any such concept. So that's the first thing. He says, saying that idea that God, so to speak, cleared a space for himself or of himself, as refined as you want to make it, it's ludicrous to apply that concept to God. Afgam zois leibedas yidaberu me'ach shehei ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim she'akadosh baruch hu yidei kol ha'yitzor shabazeh. Also, they can't be talking about Hashem's mind, that Hashem is aware or not aware. Hashem's awareness of world, as we said before, based on the Rambam, or the Rambam's teaching, God's knowledge of world and God's knowledge of information is very different than our knowledge. By us, we have 3 things: the person who knows something, the capacity, my intellectual capacity to think, and the thing that I know. We use 2 different, very different examples. That 5 times 5 is 25. So by me, this is Moshe Rapoport. My mind knows that, and the fact that 5 times 5 equals 25. If one of those things stopped, let's say I didn't know that. If you take a higher number, like 363 times 365, I have no idea what that is. And if I did know what it was, it doesn't change my existence, and my knowledge of it doesn't change the reality of that truth. And my mind is the third thing, just that which knows the information. None of those factors have to be absolutely connected to all 3. I don't have to have the knowledge in my head for that to be true. And I don't have to have that knowledge for me to exist, because we're 3 separate independent concepts. Me, my thinking capacity, and the thought, or the idea as being thought about. Or, for example, let's take the idea that cholesterol is bad for you, or smoking a cigarette is bad for you. The fact that I know that information doesn't change the truth. Like it's not like when I know it, then it's true. When I don't know it, it's not true. When God knows something, it exists. When he doesn't know it, it doesn't exist. Because God and their thought is one. So if God knows of something, only then it exists. If God doesn't know of it, it doesn't exist. There's no existence in the world that God doesn't know of. Not because he's aware and he has such a powerful computer system that he's tracking billions of things at once. Okay, 1 second, there's ants crawling here, there's people walking, there's the trees after. It's a natural sense of self, no difference that you have an awareness in a very simple level of your arm. You don't have to think, I got to remember, okay, my arm's on the right side, the arm's on the left side. This is naturally part of you, and that's just in a human being. By Hashem, all of knowledge and him is one. So to say that God doesn't know something, or that something is there but God doesn't know about, you can't say. This gets into the second concept, how the idea of Tzimtzum K'Pshutai doesn't make sense. To say that Tzimtzum K'Pshutai is actual, meaning concealment, that there's something that God is sort of less involved with. You're saying now that there's something that God is, what does it mean? That he knows of it, but it's not part of him? Meaning God's knowledge of everything, he's 100% present. He's going to go and quote a beautiful insight in the Zohar. he's going to explain if it exists, God is 100% present, not like 95% present, not 10% present. Anything that exists is 100% presence of God there, because God and it is one. If God and that thing were two separate things, you could say, okay, there's that thing, and God invests or God allows 5% of himself, whatever that means, to be there. But once we say that God, based on this teaching of the Rambam, that God and his knowledge and the thing he thinks about is one, if something is there, God is there. It's impossible to have an idea or existence of anything that doesn't include 1000% God, because God and that is one. And this is not God's view. We a number of times just want to negate the Spinoza point of view, trying to say that thing is God. No, we're not saying, God forbid, that is God. We're saying, well, I don't know how to say it properly in English. It's not that thing is a God or that's God. I mean, that is nothing more than a part of God. That's how we explained before, everything in Yichud Tata. Everything exists, but it's not a separate, independent existence. So every single thing that's out there means God is there. God is 1000% here. The difference is, can I see it? How much I see it is a difference. How much I sense the truth, but it doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the truth of what that is, because it's not a matter of I know about it. It's a matter of what it really is. So if I know something, that's nice that I know it. If I don't know it, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't change the truth. And therefore, God's presence is everywhere. The difference is if we sense it or not. And therefore, let's go back to this idea of knowledge of God, because this is like a beautiful way to understand a very deep idea. He said it sounds simple, a very deep idea of the proof that God has to be tzimtzum, not kipshotai. Based on this, and I'll read it inside. He's going back to those authorities, talking about the Gra and all the people, Chaim Volozhin, who wrote about tzimtzum that is kipshotai. He says, obviously they know, as they are believers and sons of believers, they are great Jewish people. They know Shakadosh Baruch Hu yedei kol yitzurim she'elam hazeh hashafel. Okay, let's take it step by step, says the Alter Rebbe. Hashem knows about every single thing, and their concern was that it's sort of disrespectful to say God is involved with material words like cows and ducks and chickens. It's not nice. Let someone else take care of that. He says they know that God's awareness covers every little thing, a cricket, a bug, a fly. God's knowledge is that you're not going to say God doesn't know about that. Umashkiach aleihim, and Hashem is watching over them. They believe that Hashem is governing and watching the world, and every single thing in the world is being governed and guided right now by Hashem. V'al karchach, therefore you must say, Ein yedi asay my sifra b'yiribu v'chidush. You can't say that God's awareness of this thing suddenly made God bigger. It's like, or made something new. Until now, let's say, for example, you don't know that someone bought you a new car, or you don't know that you just won a lottery. And when you find out, it's like, hey, new information. There's no new information to God. It's not like God's watching the world and goes, hey, there's more crickets than I thought. Wow, the oceans are even deeper than I imagined. There's nothing new to God. Why? Because it's all part of God. And you can't say there's information that's new, that's sort of God's aware of it. And he goes, oh, wow, or it's new. Because he's not knowing something other than self, itself. Everything that's out there, it's Hashem's knowledge of self, meaning that is God. That cricket, that bug, that fly is all part of godliness. In other words, he says, it's a hard thing to say because we talk in human terms, and human terms doesn't have such an example. He says, but basically, it's because what you know and what you see, it's all one. That is one with God. So the first thing we know is that there's nothing existing outside of God. Therefore, what you see there must be God. So that means, and God doesn't have like a percentage part, like he's part of his way there. Meaning, so whatever you're seeing, Hashem is 100% there. And now he's going to go and quote the Zohar and Raya Mehemna, which is also part of Zohar. V'zeu shekasa b'tikunin tikkun Zion. And this is what it says in the Zohar, section 57. The less asar panei minei v'loi be'iloyin v'loi b'tatayin. There is nowhere empty of him. And there's very important the words here. It doesn't say there's nowhere empty that God doesn't know about. There's nowhere empty of God. I mean, there's no place in this world that doesn't have absolute godliness there. And he says, the Zohar says that. Why? Because that's the truth. There is no place where it's less godly or less holy or less, I don't want to say less holy, less presence of God. The difference is if we sense it, sense it. But God's presence is 100% everywhere equally, and therefore you can't say Tzimtzum Kipshutai. If it was an actual contraction, it would be places where God is more and where God is less. It's like you have in your life. There are things that are front burner and back burner in your life. My most important thing, for example, is my grandchildren or my health or whatever the thing you're most important. And second of all is you want to make a puzzle or you want to try and buy a new dish for you're making brownies, whatever it is. But those things, if you don't get to it, doesn't matter. Why? It's not so important to you. By God, those two things is more important or less important. Because there aren't things that he could get to and do. One is more. Why is something important to a person? Because that's your identity, your children, your husband, your spouse, your family, your life, your health. These are me. That's not so much me. So I get the different frying pan. So I get some people, that's their whole life. They go bananas to try and find the right color car. Came with the wrong shade, their life falls apart. Because to them, that's their whole life, the color of the car. But for most people, their life is the things that are really important. Family, health, happiness, whatever it might be. So those things are more you, and there are things that are less you. By Hashem, there's nothing less him. And therefore, by Hashem, there is no place or thing in this world to say that is less godly, that is less godliness. And he explained, and that's why he says, no place is empty of Hashem. And as a key core to remember in this whole discussion, whenever we say Hashem is there, we're not able to say Hashem is a little there, Hashem is more there. Hashem is there 100%. So therefore, automatically, once you say Hashem is there, he fills that space, he's 100% there, which means it couldn't have been a tzimtzum in that place. And now he's going to explain it beautifully in the Rayim. The Rayim is a part of the Zohar, that all the Zohar was written by Shem Yochai and some of his students that he told to write it. But there are parts that he's quoting or it's officially taught by certain people. There's a tradition that Rayim Mehemna is what Moshe Rabbeinu taught. It's from Moshe. So Rayim Mehemna, Parshas Pinchas, in the Rayim Mehemna, this part of the Zohar, in the portion of Pinchas, Ihu Tufis, it says the following, and it's he's going to quote about 6 or 7 lines of this, and then he's going to explain it in his own words. So I'll start reading it and translate it, then we'll go back and explain it. He says, Ihu Tufis Bekula, Veles Man Tufis Beichulu. First thing, he grasps everything, but nothing grasps him. So the first aspect of Hashem, he says, the Rabbi Moshe describes, God grasps all, but nothing grasps him. Okay? Then it says, he encompasses all of the world. We'll explain what we're going to get into another very basic and fundamental idea in Chassidus is these two expressions of Soviv and Mamali. Soviv literally means what goes around. Now, it doesn't mean around literally, because not like this, like, again, everything we use in Kabbalah or Chassidus, we don't mean physical, spatial, like something is around. As we'll explain soon, Soviv really means that it's not in me. It's around. So I'll give the example would be, let's say I have an idea, but that idea you can't really relate to because either you don't understand the person or because it doesn't affect you. So the idea is not really modified to fit you. The idea is a general idea. So it's not necessarily fit for the receiver. That's called a mali. It's like one of the examples given, even though it's again example of space, is a difference, let's say, between a house and food or clothes and food. One is outside of you. It doesn't become part of me. I hear you. I'm in the house. I walked in the house. I walked out of the house. I put on the clothes. I took off the clothes. Now, a house and clothes are two different types of seviv. One is a very outside one, a house, and it's not necessarily modified for each person. It's modified just for human people. It's not made for elephants, but it's made for humans. And clothes are made for your particular shape and size, etc., etc. But still, they're not really part of you. Food actually becomes part of you. You ingest it, it becomes part of you, because one with you. Mali means I'm modifying it. Therefore, food has to really be fit for you to consume. I can't give you raw chicken. I can't give you unground grain that wasn't, or hard things have to be ground up. It has to be made and fit for you. Same with ideas. Ideas could be something I say, and I talk about an idea in medicine. You hear what I'm saying, but it doesn't really touch you. Not because you don't understand necessarily. It's not designed necessarily for you. It's like you hear, it's not the same as not having das, a connection. That's another idea. That's something else. That could be in a lot of areas. Here means it's just not fit for you. We'll get to it. The Mali means it's fit, I tailor it for you. It's something that fits you and you can relate to it, which means the difference would be very important. when you're using idea of Soviv, let's take for an example Einstein giving a class. When Einstein gives a class in Soviv level, he is not taking into consideration who's listening. He's sharing a thought, whether it fits you or not. It's the same thought. He's giving the same thought goes to a 10-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 70-year-old professor. Mamali means I am tailoring my thought for you, which means you're not getting the original thought anymore. He's now thinking, okay, what could this 15-year-old get? You know, I'm leaving out all the complexities. I'm leaving out this. I'm just going to tell him one thought. So you can walk away saying, wow, I understood Einstein. Yes, you did, and it's awesome. But he gave you a Mamali version, which is very modified and tailored. So it has the advantage that you can receive it. It has disadvantage that it's not the original deal. So we're going to talk about that. So he says, first of all, EU save element, God is everywhere on a makif level, on an external level. V'les man the nofik mishusei lebar. No one could leave his presence. These are all words quoted in the Zohar here. No one is able to leave God's area. You can't say, you know what, like maybe Yonah and you read the story, he's running away from God. You really can't run away from God. If you're Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, if you're Cain you can't run away and hide. It doesn't work. Then he says, Ihu Malik Amachul. He fills up all the worlds. And then he says a very cool idea. Ihu Mikasher Umiyachet Zin Lazine. He connects and bonds one thing to another. Ilo Vetata, above and below. Veles Kurva Bedali Yisaid and the only way to bond things is with God. By nature, anything in the world you want to connect means they're not one, they're opposites. And then by nature they can't bond. For example, fire and water, hot and cold. You can't say I'm going to bring together hot and cold. Well, you could, but one's going to stop being hot, or one's going to stop being cold. You can't remain hot, remain cold, and become together. The ability to do that only God can do. God can only take opposites. He says nothing in the world would bond. Truth to be told, he says, the 4 primary elements in the world, which is wind, fire, earth, and water, are all polar extremes and opposites and can't function with one another. Fire and water can't work together. Earth and dirt, earth and wind. If you put earth and wind together, either it's blowing dust in the air or it's a clump of earth. Again, all these elements don't work together naturally. Hashem makes a miracle and brings them all together to form everything we see in this universe. So the only thing that could bond things and bring opposites together is Hashem. That's why we say the famous line constantly, Hashem makes peace in the heaven. What does that mean? He could take the Malach Michal and Malach Gavriel, who are polar opposites, one's fire, one's water, and brings them together. So Hashem is the only one that can bring things together. That's the end of the quote from the Rai Memna. Hashem is the only one who can bring everything together. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to explain this Zohar, and with the Zohar, we'll have a very good understanding of why Tzimtzum is not Kipshutai. This is a lot of it I'll read inside and explain it because he goes through it very slowly and carefully. But that's a lamer. So what are we being told in the Talmud in the Zohar here? Less man the toughest bay. What does it mean? No one could grasp him. It's talking about in our minds. There is no created being. I'm not talking about humans now. There is no created being that can say, I understand God. It's a very important idea. Because a lot of times we're frustrated that ideas that we talk about Hashem are out of our price range, out of our ability. It's like we're talking about, I can't grasp it. Don't feel bad. Even the angels can't. Even the higher celestial beings can't. Even we say machshava akduma da'ak. Even the highest level at Tzilus. You're talking about things that are billions of light years ahead of us. They can't get it. If they can't get it, don't worry. Nothing can grasp God. It's the first thing to know. When you want to talk about God, and sometimes you say, I don't understand. No kidding. Now, we're allowed to be frustrated, allowed to try to understand, but to think that, because I don't understand, it doesn't make sense. You have an old, not as a joke or not, but it's an old story, it's true, an anecdote about these 2 Chassidim in Russia, or Ukraine, wherever they lived back then, and they were reading in the Gemara where it says that 2/3 of the earth is water. It says this in the Talmud, 2/3 is water and 1/3 is earth, 1/3 is dry land. So one says to his friend, I don't know, I've been from here to Radzinov, from here to Atvatsk, from here to the Polonsk. I was all over the world, when there were little shtetls. I never saw that much water. Well, that's what it says in the Torah, I accept it. They recognize that we don't understand that. Obviously, they never saw a fraction even of Poland or Ukraine where they lived. But there's a certain approach to recognize it's out of my range. So I don't understand it. It's a different world. So the first thing to know is that man cannot grasp, and no created being can grasp Hashem. Mikol sichlim helyenim, no even celestial or spiritual being could grasp godliness. So the angels, it's not like the angel Machol. They once had this person who came by to the Rebbe, this brilliant person, right? I forget his name right now. And Rabbi Yoel Khan was there, and he came to the Rebbe and had a discussion with the Rebbe a very deep way. They weren't even talking about words. They just said, like, Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, page 27. And the Rebbe would respond like, well, the Talmud there in 26. And he would say, well, they were having a discussion for a while and quoting, people who lived in the 10th, 12th century, people who lived, all different commentators, just discussions they all knew what they meant. When he was done and he came out, he told the Rabbi Khan, he said, you have no idea who your Rebbe is. And he told him, and you think you do? Yeah. At your level, everyone thinks that a kid says, wow, he is so strong, this guy, he can lift up 20 pounds. He is, everyone on their level, but even the greatest tzaddikim, even the greatest angels can't grasp God. We're talking about a different world of existence, of knowledge, of experience. It doesn't exist. And then he says further, you can't understand anything of God's essence. And he says, for an example, like it says in the Dikunim, and he does something very interesting here. He says, the Dikunim, which is Zohar, it says that God has stima de kol stimin, hidden of all hiddens. And there's all different ways to explain. What does it mean, hidden of all hiddens? So sometimes you say it means, well, the most hidden stuff. It means it's hidden even from those who understand hidden stuff, or it's hidden even from those things that are hidden. In other words, we have a way a lot of times of thinking that things that we don't understand don't make sense. It's not so smart. It doesn't make sense. And we look at it as a lower thing. I don't understand it, it's probably wrong. In Torah, the less you understand of it, the indication of its greatness. If you want to know what's greater, you look what's revealed. And it's a very interesting line we find when we're davening in the morning, and we say the words, in the beginning of Shema, we say Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech. Yotzer Or means he creates light, Uvorei Choshech, and he creates darkness. But the words Yotzer Or and Borei Choshech really refer to, in the four worlds, you have Atzilus, Beria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Atzilus being the highest. Then you have Beria, then you have Yetzira. Yotzer is the world Yetzira. Borei is the world Beria. But the interesting thing is, when we say Yotzer, we touch Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech. So we touch our hand fill-in for Yetzira. Yotzer, our hand fill-in. Yotzer Uvorei Choshech. We say that we touch our hand fill-in for Yotzer Or, and Borei Choshech, we touch our head fill-in. Why? Because Borei is higher and Yotzer is lower, so the head fill-in is higher and the hand fill-in is lower. But if you look at the words, we say Yotzer, we say Or. When it comes to the lower world, we call it light. Borei, the higher world of Ria, we call Choshech. Why is the higher world called dark and the lower world called light? It should be the other way around. The higher world should be called light, lower world should be called dark. So instead of talking from our perspective, the lower worlds, we see, wow, someone here is a scientist speaking and they understand that level, they go, wow, this guy is brilliant. You hear the scientist speaking above your level? I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't know. He's just hawking a China. If you don't understand, a lot of times we have a way of perspective. If it's out of my range, it's not smart. It doesn't make sense. Out of my range means it's above me. It's even greater. So the idea of stimin means there's a level that's stimin which is concealed completely. We find a similar concept in our garments. A person's soul has three garments. You have the garment of thought, speech, and action. Which is the highest level of your thought, of your garments is thought. But thoughts are concealed. What I'm thinking now is concealed, especially if I'm having very deep emotions or having very deep ideas. If I want to express it, something's going to happen. Why? If I'm going to express my feelings that you could hear them, that means you're not getting my full thing. Why? Because what I have inside of me can't be expressed. Automatically, by expressing something, I'm limiting it to the words that I'm going to use. Any description you're going to give, like you ask somebody, how much do you love your kids? And the more you talk about it, the more you're making it worse. Meaning, I love them more than a mountain, more than to the moon and back, whatever they say. What does that mean? That means, could you give a limit to how much a mother loves a child? No.
This much.
Yeah, this much. Yeah, this much. Infinity times 2, 3 times 100, So the bottom line is, once you can describe something, you're limiting it. The only unlimited thing is something you can say, I can't describe it. Even better is I don't understand it. That means, so this is the idea. Stima means the idea of godliness is stima is hidden. It's not by definition something which can be understood. And that's what shows its greatness. It can't be understood. It's so heavy, nobody can pick it up. Not even a hydraulic lift. Nothing can pick it up. That's how heavy it is. Wow. If you don't say a strong man can pick it up, no one can pick it up. No one can understand it. That's what we're talking about here. The less machshavat feisa b'chlal, and nobody could understand. He says begam betachtonim, also down here. So not only is God's level of brilliance or essence or truth or endlessness true in heavens, but begam betachtonim, also down here in this physical world is God's presence. The way no one can understand it. God's presence. This is the beauty of doing a mitzvah. A person might say, "What am I doing? I'm taking a lulav. I'm taking an esrog, a branch of a tree. I'm taking a shofar, which is made from like the nails of the horn of an animal." This is such great godliness that we're tapping into. God's giving us a window, a tool, a conduit. That I always tell you, there's God everywhere. Tap into that with the shofar. Tap into that with the lulav and esrog. Tap into that with the sukkah. I'm giving you a chance to see how you can get into this holiness. To go a few more lines here. Now, even though we say God fills the world, there's an expression of the Gemara and in the Medrash that says, just like the soul fills the body, the same thing God fills the world. That's an expression we have. Just like the neshama fills the body, so God fills the world. But the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us, but there's a major difference. What's the major difference? First of all, when your soul fills the body, and your body goes through stuff, your soul feels pain. Your soul, who has pain? When God forbid somebody's going through a sadness, someone passed away, or someone's hurt, or something, something broke off, some painful thing. Where do you think that pain is? It's your arm, your elbow, your shoulder, your neck, your head. It's in your soul. Your soul could feel pain. Your soul feels it. So your soul is affected by the experiences. Your soul is affected by what goes around it. What that means, your soul is not limitless. Your soul could learn and change and have new experiences. It came in one way, goes out another way. Usually we hope much better, much more brighter. But the soul does get affected by the experiences. God's filling the world doesn't get affected. It doesn't happen that God says, "Oh my goodness, you messed up here. Now I'm getting a boo-boo on my shoulder." God doesn't get affected by the world's experiences because his place while he's here, there's no spot you can point to that he is here present or being affected by. What does that mean? Let's see this inside. The soul fills the body in a way that it actually becomes emotionally affected and inspired and affected by the experiences of the body. Vitzare, it's pain, and he gives here what type of pain? Emotion. He mentions three types of pain, three types of things: hakais, being hit; oi kirirais, or cold; oi chamimais, or chamimas eish, or heat of fire. And the Rebbe's father actually explains why he chose these three things and why the last one he adds on of fire. He doesn't say, he says a wound, feeling an injury, hot, cold, or hot of fire. So he says, first of all, why he says hot of fire instead of saying, it doesn't say cold as ice, he says hot of fire. He says hot of fire means it's a heat from a certain source called fire. You see, you can have different sources of heat in your body. If you have an infection, there's no fire there. You can't say, oh, it must be a fire in my arm somewhere. No, you have an infection and there's heat building up from the infection or something like that. That falls in the category of injury. He wants to say different things. So he has to say heat that comes from a fire. This is not heat that it's cold outside and you go inside, there's a fire, you get warmed up. Or it's really hot and you can get, God forbid, really, really toasty from the fire. That's different than heat that came from an injury or another place. What are these three things? He says, Hakais refers to das. We're talking about the three primary emotions that a person experiences. The two primary emotions are chesed and gvura. Those are the first two of all the emotions. But what is that bridge that gaps from intellect to emotion? We said many times it's das. A person has intellect, and we said the two parts of intellect are conception and comprehension. When you understand something, conception means I conceive an idea. Comprehension is developing the idea, getting it to develop into a whole idea. But those two things don't necessarily affect you emotionally. You could be studying a court case. Very complex court case where one of the people are actually going to be convicted and executed. One of two people. You could study that court case completely emotionally detached. You know why? Because you don't know anybody in that court case. That's called Chachma and Binu without Das. I have no connection to it. So it doesn't affect me emotionally. Das means I feel it. Someone gives you a punch in your arm. Suddenly it's personal. The guy punches the chair, the guy punches the table, doesn't bother me. Punches the arm, now it's personal. Why? I was punching stuff all day long, but that didn't bother me. When you learn about a court case and suddenly it's not talking about this, you're talking about your grandfather, talking about a cousin, talking about somebody even closer to you, suddenly you're emotionally affected by every argument. What do you mean you're saying this? I have a better. Why are you getting so emotional? Because I'm no longer intellectually honest or intellectually pure. I'm now emotionally involved because of Das. So Das represents that injury, represents I'm being affected by it. That's Das. And then cold and hot is Chesed and Gevurah. We know Chesed is cold, cool. Gevurah is fire. So this idea of a wound, cold and hot represent Chesed, Das, Chesed, and Gevurah. We'll stop in just a moment. But the bottom line is what we're going through here is now explaining how Hashem, on one hand, is 100% present because his Das, his knowledge of world, is knowledge of himself. It's himself. At the same time, his being here is completely concealed or not seen to the point that God's not affected by the experiences that go on around us or go on around him. As we see, a human being, his soul, fills the body and is affected by injury, is affected by hot, is affected by cold. As a matter of fact, all of our experiences are not the body. It's the body as a conduit, a tool, an interface, that's the word. The body is the interface between the soul and the world, because the soul doesn't have physical components. So it needs an interface of a body through the whole system, Hashem made, how it interfaces with the world. But all the experiences, the painful, the happy ones, the joyous ones, the sad ones, those are the soul. And that's why we say when someone passes away, the body dies. Now the person would say, who's the soul anyway? All of your experiences, every experience you had, every time you had a good day and a bad day, a memory, a joy, that continues to live. You just can't interact. The interface system's gone. So you can't do things in the world. But yourself is completely transformed, unlike what happens to Hashem. Hashem in the world, while he's here, he doesn't get affected by the experiences. And the last line here to do is Kadosh Baruch Hu she'eini makabel shum shinui mishnui l'mazeh. Hashem has no experience or effect to him from all the changes in the physical world. Mekayes lechede, from summer to winter, meyayim liyayla, from day to night. Kedechsiv, like it says, gam cheshiv layashchich mimcha layla kiyim yair. Like it says, for Hashem, darkness doesn't make it dark, and light at nighttime is as bright as day. He is not at all grasped by the worlds. That's what it means. Hashem grasps all, but Hashem is not at all affected by the world. Nothing in this world affects him.